was just on a show with Keith Andrews. I think he's doing a great job. He should keep it up. He's got a great cause. My name is Jesse Porter, and I really suggest any talent or any other athletes to go on a show.
Gentlemen, you're watching the Keith Andrew Network. It is episode 621. That's right, 621. I'm here with Jesse Porter. I just want to say thank you for being a guest on my talk show.
Hey, no problem. Anytime.
No, the honor's all mine. For people who want to know what my talk show's about, whole point of my talk show is to show people that even with having a learning disability, I can still amount to something. And at the same time, I'm able to turn myself into an example for people out there dealing with any types of learning disabilities and disabilities to never give up and prove people wrong. Prove to them that labels do not dictate who you are and who you're going to be. Just prove to them it's them out to something. So that being said, half hour, 33 minutes of your time. And for people who want to know, and I don't know why I wrote down Jordan, that was my fault. People who want to know, maybe I had my friend on my mind. Anyway, actually, no. The reason I wrote down Jordan is because there's a wrestler named Jordan Gable. But we can get to wrestling in a little bit. But anyone who wants to know who Jesse Porter is, you are a amateur wrestler. But before we get to that, I'm going to ask you the two easy questions first. One, how's life growing up? And who influenced you to become an amateur wrestler?
Oh, that's a great question. I love answering that one. I've answered that one many times. I come from a family of wrestlers. I mean, my mom was a wrestler, my dad was a wrestler, both of my sisters wrestle, and so it's really a family affair for me. And I was brought up into wrestling, and I loved it as a kid. I really did. I mean, at first, my dad threw me in, and he threw me into like two age divisions ahead of me, and he kind of beat me up a little bit, roughing me up, and and at the end of it, he's like, "Hey, you want to quit?" And I asked him, and I said word for word, this is what I said. I said, "No, I want you to teach me." And then from there on out, he knew that what he was working with. So I just continued to wrestle, and I've been wrestling ever since I was 8 years old, all the way from Pee-wees to now I'm on senior level.
I mean, like, Jesus, I can just imagine what Thanksgiving's like. Wrestling over that drumstick or a gravy ball. It's like, give me that gravy ball and I get you in a crossface.
Yeah, I know. It's a crazy house. I mean, anytime you come over to the Porter house, it's going to be wrestling, it's going to be a lot of wrestling. I mean, we like to bring guests downstairs to show them, throws or anything, and they're always amazed. They love it. We have a mat in our basement, so it's really great, great for our guys that we bring over.
Have you ever thought about actually buying for an actual ring, or do you just like the mat?
No. For my sport, amateur wrestling, we just wrestle on a mat, which has a circle. I've never wrestled in a ring before. There is beach wrestling now, and I think that sometime in the future I might be getting into that. That looks really interesting, so that could be on the horizon for me. I have never really considered going into UFC, but a lot of wrestlers they go, they transfer over to UFC and do really well. But I definitely have considered some other different types, like beach wrestling. So.
It's funny you should mention that. Now I'm not thinking beach wrestling, but hey, if you have a couple beautiful women, you have a great time. But just throwing it out there. Anyway, then I'll keep it PG. There's a couple of people who I actually befriended who are amateur wrestlers, and there are some of the greatest amateur wrestlers ever. But before I get to that, are you a WWE fan or a TNA fan? And how did that whole influence? I know you said your mother, your father, and your sister, and your whole family are amateur wrestlers. What about the WWF or the WWE have an impact on you, or was that like a flip and switch, or was it it's just a family tradition?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, the WWE doesn't really have anything to do with me. That's, as we call it, fake wrestling, right? It's constructed.
How
It
dare
is
you,
a
sir?
even though wrestling for me is still a performance for the audience, I am still performing for the audience. It is real. You're actually wrestling. It's me against him, you against the opponent, and we're actually wrestling. It's not staged at all. That is the difference between us and WWE. How has WWE had an influence on me? I mean, it's rather funny influence actually, because growing up, the only thing that they knew about was WWE, but they didn't know anything about real wrestling, right? So anytime I said I was a wrestler, they said, "Oh, you mean like with the chairs?" That was always the that was always the answer, and I was like, "No, no. Do you want to see?" They're like, "Ah." So, but that was kind of the influence that WWE had on me. Kind of overshadowed me a little bit when I was younger. Wrestling has changed since then. My career has changed, but early on, it was kind of an overshadowing deal.
No, I agree with you, and there are some of the great people. Ken Shamrock. You know, just had a brain fart. I was gonna say something, but let's keep it positive. One of my favorites, Ken Shamrock. Brock Lesnar, Kurt Angle, Mark Henry, Bret the Hitman Hart. I don't know him as a human being, but as a professional wrestler, he will always be one of my greats. Chris Benoit. You had Chris Jericho. You just had these certain groups, and people today, have Jordan Gable. You had the other guy from American Alphas. You just had these great group of people that know how to mat wrestle, but you can actually turn it into a sports entertainment. But look at where they come from. You have a bright future ahead of you. I'm not kissing your ass or anything, but you have a bright future, and you could be the next WWE Intercontinental Champion or the WWE. And by the way, I'm a big wrestling fan. Or a next United States champion, or you can actually be the next Kurt Angle. And not saying you're going to go into the Olympics with a broken freaking neck, but you could just win a gold medal. You can do things and establish yourself as a great professional athlete. And once you get to that point, hey, the sky's the limits to you. You can be in WWE, you can go to UFC, even though I'm not really a big fan of UFC. But I do like MMA, and there's so many different things. And even if you want to become an actor, you can say you have a wrestling background, and there's so many options for you once you get established. But with the names I mentioned, Kurt Angle, Ken Shamrock, Jordan Gable, with all those people, Brock Lesnar, have you ever thought about going one-on-one with them? And do you think you would copy their status or wrestling type of style?
Yeah. So if I were to go one on one with them in WWE, it would all be for show, obviously. So there wouldn't really be that much thought to it. All of it would be planned. If we're talking about MMA or UFC, well then I've already touched upon that. I've never really considered getting into a cage to fight or anything. Why? It's just I'm a wrestler at heart. I mean, that's what I like to do. I don't feel like I need to go into that. I mean, a lot of wrestlers feel like they need to go into the UFC. I mean, there's not a big drive for me to want to go into the UFC. So I haven't really considered it.
Well, I never actually said, okay, yes, I did say WWE, but I mean, I was hinting towards more of an amateur wrestling based match.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah. If it's still wrestling, of course, I would be down to wrestle anybody, honestly. So.
Now, the next question I was going to ask you, and to cater into the people with disabilities, because I am an advocate for that, is for people with disabilities who want to become an amateur wrestler. What words of wisdom or advice would you have to give for them?
If they want to become an amateur wrestler, that's a great question. Um, I'd say, one of the biggest things, and I know this is very cliche, but you have to have fun. I mean, that is really a huge part of it, is that you have to have fun, because with wrestling, at a young age, when you're like at that, preteen age where you're wrestling, you're just starting to get onto the varsity, and the practices are over and over, practice, drill, drill, drill. It can get kind of daunting. So you have to remember that, you're drilling so that you can use these moves in the match. I mean, that's really the fun of wrestling, is, learning a new move and being excited about it and trying in a match and then, it working, right? And, coming back, working on stuff alone, right? Maybe you have a coach or something, you're going to work on your stuff, and then you come on, and then they haven't seen you in 6 months, right? You come back, and they're like, whoa, who is this guy? What happened to him? And he's killing everyone. That is really, really the fun part about wrestling, is, seeing those improvements pay off. The other thing is that, remember that, winning isn't everything. It really isn't, because the things that you get from wrestling are priceless. They are literally priceless. Just the courage, the self-confidence, determination, the grit that it takes to be in the sport. Not only that, the special thing about wrestling compared to other sports is that it doesn't get the attention that I think it deserves, that a lot of the wrestlers think it deserves. It doesn't get the attention. And that makes it special, because it is an extra adversity on top of every adversity that you already have to deal with. And so, since it's an extra adversity, it makes it special. It makes it more than just a sport. And I think that that's really special about wrestling.
Well, let me ask you, because it's funny, because when I promoted you to be a guest on the show, a coach, I think he's friends with you, or I don't know, someone recognized you, and he took offense that I called you a professional wrestler. And then, a long story short, I had to change it from pro wrestler. I didn't say did I? Maybe I did. Who knows? I don't. If I want to do something stupid, I try to forget about it. But I said I'm going to have you on the show. I think I said a professional wrestler or pro wrestler, and he's like, he doesn't do either of those. He's an amateur wrestler. Then I asked you, what should I refer you as? So there's a difference between a pro wrestler. I'm not talking about WWE, not talking about WCW or all that. What's the difference between being a pro wrestler versus an amateur wrestler? What you do, you get behind somebody and you pick them up, you throw them down, all that. Because a pro wrestler does that too. So what's the difference between the two?
So, I say the difference between the two. I've seen a couple leagues of pro wrestling overseas. I've seen some in Greco. I've seen some in freestyle. It's really not prevalent in the United States. United States, the most prevalent style is folk style, right? And that would be NCAA's, and that's not pro wrestling either. That's also amateur wrestling. So that's all most people are familiar with, is folk style in the United States. Most people don't even know that there's two other styles. But all around the world, they don't do folk style. They do the other two styles, just freestyle and Greco. There's pro wrestlers that are paid a certain amount, right? And they're on these European teams, right? And they'll wrestle against each other, just like, pro leagues, And so those would be pro wrestlers, right? Now they're a small breed, right? It's not the main. It's like not the main ship of wrestling, if so to speak, right? The main ship of wrestling is the amateur wrestling, is the Olympic route, right? Where the best that you can do, the best you can be in amateur wrestling is Olympic champion, Olympic and world champion. That is the best you can be. That's the top cream of the crop. But in pro wrestling, they'd have a bunch of wrestlers with different accolades wrestle each other. So they'd pick matches like this guy, this Olympic champion, this guy, and they'd have them wrestle each other. Or they'd organize teams and have those teams go together. And they get paid a certain salary for that. So those would be pro wrestlers. But like I said, it's not prevalent in the United States. I've never seen a pro team over here. I've never been part of a pro team either. So.
No, I agree with you. And, there are people who, are in high school, college, who do amateur wrestling. There's amateur wrestling in Olympics, too. So, say, hypothetically, just laughing at this one, I wanted to be an amateur wrestler, but I wear glasses. Is that an inhabitants? Is that like one of those things that will prohibit you from being an amateur wrestler? I know you wear sports goggles, so I know. Okay, look at it like this: would you really wrestle with someone with glasses on? I guess not, because what happens if you break your glasses? Then you're blind as a bat. But you can get those sports goggles. But what are the rules of being an amateur wrestler?
What are the rules? Well, I mean, it depends on what you're talking about. There's a lot of rules for Greco-Roman wrestling, and they change periodically. Same for freestyle, folk style. The rules, they have rules too. I could get into detail. There's a lot of different rules. But for Greco, the main rule is that you can't touch the legs, right?
Yeah.
Not offensively or defensively. Freestyle, you can touch the legs, anything else or whatever. Folk style, you can touch the legs. The only difference between folk style and freestyle is that they have parterre freestyle, right? The guy goes down, right, and you have to turn him, and you get points if you turn him, past 90 degrees. And in folk style, the turns aren't points, right? If you turn the guy and he rolls over his back, you don't get points for that. The whole point of folk style is to keep the guy down, right? And the guy on bottom has to get out, right? That's the only that's really the biggest difference between folk style and freestyle. If we're looking at basics here, there are some little other minute differences, but those are the big ones.
What about, say, back to the question of someone, say you're wrestling somebody, and they have like the sports goggles with just glasses in general. Is that, how do you go about that? Like, okay, you can wear glasses as a wrestler, or is that considered like a weapon, or is that considered like, how would you describe that?
Well, there are these things called contacts. So, I mean, most people will just wear contacts if they have glasses. If they're not old enough to, have contacts, would that be like peewees, right? I remember there are some kids with goggles. Most of the kids would just wrestle, blind, because, to be honest, I started that way. I just got vision, I just got surgery right now. I would be wearing glasses right now. I've had glasses for my whole life, to be honest. So, like, at 15, I got my contacts, and I just started wearing them at competitions. But before that, no contacts, just blind, just wrestling blind. But it was fine for me because it kind of was an extra adversity. And then once I got those contacts, I wrestled so much better. And then now I don't even have contacts. My eyes can breathe. It's like another layer added off. So,
but it's not. You bring up an interesting point. But you wrestle with contacts. That's not really, to be honest, the smartest thing. Was say like you wrestling and they accidentally slam your head onto the floor. Your contacts can actually scrape your retina. So it is a kind of okay. Yes, you want to see as you're wrestling, but at the same time, you don't want to make yourself blind at it.
Yeah, it's a risk. There's a lot of risk. I mean, there's way bigger risk than getting your cornea scratched. I mean, there's risk with breaking your arms. The list goes on and on. Neck problems, people yanking on your neck all the time. I mean, these things are real issues. Oh, mat diseases. There's also tons of deadly mat diseases out there that you can catch. So, and that doesn't even happen in competition. That happens in practice. So, there's a lot of risk, associated with wrestling.
No, absolutely. Now, actually, we're going to save this one from the commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk about social media. And with that being said, what were some of your favorite matches when we come back from the break?
Hi, I'm Marissa Joy Davis.
This is Michelle Wong.
And I'm Nancy Rose.
My name is Brandy Hunt. And
hello, my name is Raven Wynn.
Hi there. My name is Giovanna Vidal.
Hi, I'm Monica Thomas.
Hi, I'm Paisley Blackburn.
I'm Ashley Burgess.
Hi, my name is Jeanette Abney.
Hi, I'm Sharon Spank.
Hey, this is Samantha Moore.
Hi, I'm Melody Jones.
Hi, my name is Becky Yee.
Hi, you're watching the Keith Andrew Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the Keith Andrew Network. This is episode 621. I'm here. It's Jesse Porter, and now it's the last 13 minutes and counting. I'm going to ask you about social media and what were some of your favorite amateur moments in wrestling matches. So the first one is social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, any ones that I didn't mention. Do those dictate if people should work with you and if you get booked for matches? Now, I know this is not like WWE or anything, but do you think having a solid fan base plays a big part?
Yeah, it depends on what you're in the sport for, but I definitely think that having a solid fan base makes it a lot easier for you to progress in the sport, right? If you're having a solid fan base and the sport is very popular and you're able to get a solid fan base, it makes it a lot easier to, get fundraising and go to other tournaments and get more experience and the list goes on for that. And so, yeah, I think that to a certain extent, it helps a lot with the progressing in your career.
No, absolutely. What were some of your favorite moments that you ever had? And I know you're still in the game. What's in the horizon for you?
Yeah. Okay. So the first thing I actually thought of when you said that was a match a long time ago, right when I was in high school. I think I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore and I was wrestling in a tournament called Eastern States. And this tournament is one of the hardest tournaments, well, if not the hardest tournament of the season, right? It's harder than States, right? Because it has more than one state. That's why it's called Eastern States. It's got PA, New Jersey, Virginia, people coming from there, people coming from, and these are some of the best states for wrestling in the United States, right? So this tournament's really tough. And that year I had somebody that was a very decent wrestler, right? He wasn't even from another state. He was actually from my section. He was from my area, right? And so this was a very important match because this guy that I was wrestling, I needed to beat him in order to go to states, right? So it was a very important match that I had to beat. I had him in the semis of Eastern States, and basically it was hard because that tournament, before that tournament I was sick, and I had 106 fever, right? I ended up still going to the tournament and wrestling, and I didn't know that I had 106 fever until after the fact, right? But I was wondering why I was feeling, I was headaches, sweating, throwing up in the bathroom, right? So I wrestled him, and that was a tough match. It went into triple overtime. And I had to dig really deep in that match. I dug so deep that I remember it to this day. That's how deep I dug, because I've had a lot of matches. I've wrestled a lot of matches, and I know that match was really hard because I remember it till this day. And I ended up beating him by 1 point, basically on criteria, and it was at the last second. And that was just a really hard match, testing my heart. And so
that has to be one of your favorite matches.
Yeah, that's definitely a very memorable match.
Now, what about any titles? I'm going to pass the show over to you with this one. Because you showed me a couple pictures, and I promoted them on Instagram. You have a plaque that you have, but also, what is your goal? Do you want to be the next, Kurt Angle, and you want to be going to the Olympics, or is there any other wrestlers that you do want to copy their, not appearance, mannerisms and wrestling styles and add it to your own? Because it's always good to adapt. You have to evolve. If you stop evolving, you're going to die. So you have to adapt, you have to evolve, you have to stay 2 steps ahead of everything. You need to stay focused on what you want. But say like Kurt Angle or Ken Shamrock or any of those amateur wrestlers that you want to incorporate your moves to their moves, but also put some spice on it and make it a little different? Do you think that will help you down the road? And what belts, or even if you guys don't do belts, what trophies do you want to win?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, obviously, one of my biggest goals is to be world and Olympic champion. I'm at the USOEC right now, which is the U.S. Olympic Education Center in Northern Michigan University, and it's the only center in the United States where you can train full-time Greco and get an education at the same time. There's only one. And so that's why I'm here. I'm here to get an education and train for the Olympics so that I can become an Olympic champion. I also have a bigger goal of becoming the best wrestler who has ever lived. And the reason and the way I would get to that goal is by doing more than just winning. Because I've always believed that there's more than just winning matches. It's how you win the matches. It's dominating. It's creating new moves that no one has ever seen before. You're not just wrestling, you're performing. Right? So I feel like I can bring a new element to the sport that's, never ever been seen before.
No, I agree. And, I keep thinking of WWE and how can you incorporate that in amateur wrestling. You can't just give someone a low blow. You can't just give them like a fun to the eye. Even though it would be pretty funny, but you have people watching. So, just saying that. Just saying it would be really funny. But, do you guys have your amateur championship belts? I know some colleges have actual belts. Have you ever wanted to win one, or?
Yeah, so there is a belt for winning the world championships. When you win the world championships, you will get a belt. That's really the only belt that I'm concerned about winning. So.
Yeah, very cool. Now it's the last 6 minutes and counting. I'm going to pass it over to you. I know you are very interested in talking about these subjects, and you are very hell-bent on being on the show, and I thank you for that. So if this is your time, you can promote anything you want. You're supporting the cause, making a good friend out of it. So I'm very interested in hearing the subjects that you want to talk about.
Yeah, so the biggest subject that I want to talk about is the dynamic that is included with Greco-Roman wrestling. I know a lot of your viewers probably don't know anything about wrestling at all, but there's 3 different styles. There's folk style, freestyle, and Greco, right? Now, the difference between these styles is folk style is the most prevalent in the United States. That's the one that most people will know about, right? Then there's freestyle and Greco. Freestyle and Greco are the styles that are done all over the world, right? So we kind of live in our own little bubble in the United States, right? Because we only know about folk style, but literally everyone else around us is doing freestyle and Greco, right? So if I go to a different country, the popularity of the sport is totally different. Totally different. They'll fill stadiums for Greco-Roman wrestling, but over here it's just a total flip. And so,
if I may,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't mean to interrupt, but if I may, I know someone's going to ask me in the comments, what is Greco?
What is Greco? Right. Greco-Roman wrestling. Greco-Roman wrestling is a style of wrestling. It's for amateur wrestlers. And basically the biggest difference between the other 2 styles of wrestling is that you cannot touch the legs, right? Not offensively or defensively, right? So it's all upper body, right? There's also part tear when the guy goes on bottom and you can get on top, right? And then the goal is to turn the guy, right? He wants to make sure that you don't turn him, and you're trying to turn the guy, right? If you turn the guy, you will get points. You can also throw the guy from bottom too. So that is really, the premise, the basics of Greco-Roman wrestling.
No, very cool. And how do you feel about people doing I don't know, it sounded good in my head, now it sounds stupid. There's a women's wrestling too, or amateur wrestling. And people are like, you see movies where it's like, oh, you're going to be wrestling against this girl, and then you get your ass kicked by the girl. How do you feel about 2 high school teams or 2 college elite teams or 2 champion teams, but they're the opposite. Would you have an issue wrestling when it was a girl, or that wouldn't even be a question? Because
No,
whatever
yeah,
happened.
I love that topic because I'm actually very passionate about women's wrestling. Both of my sisters wrestle. My little sister wrestles, my older sister wrestles, and I'm right behind that train with women's wrestling. Women's wrestling is currently growing at an exponential rate right now. It's currently making the sport grow, wrestling as a whole, right? And I just think that's fantastic. I think that girls, women wrestling is great. I mean, I feel like it empowers women, and that's always good too. And to answer your question about wrestling women, no, I really don't have a problem with that. I've done it in the past. It's just another point. I mean, there really shouldn't be any difference. So.
No, absolutely. Hey, as long as you do it professionally, that's all that matters.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I do have a couple questions for you off the air, but wrapping up our interview segment. How can people follow you on social media? Are you on LinkedIn, Twitter, Stage 32, if people even use that anymore? How can people follow you?
Well, I am on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Twitter. My Twitter handle is jporter_2015. My Instagram is jporter, no underscore, 2015. And that's Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. I'm also on Facebook. You just search Jesse Porter or Jesse Porter Wrestling. It'll get you there faster. I'm also on Pinterest, not on there that much though. I think that's it. In my LinkedIn, you can just look up Jesse Porter Wrestling too, and that'll get you there.
No, absolutely. My last question for you is, when I first approached you to be a guest on my talk show, what was your honest first reaction to it when you read it? What made you say yes? And how do you feel now, and what do you recommend it to other people?
I saw it as a great opportunity to, get my voice out there a little bit. I mean, I feel like I have a lot to say. I have a lot to say about Greco. I feel like there's a lot of things that people don't know about Greco, and there's a lot of other things that people don't know about wrestling in general. That a lot of people don't. A lot of people still believe that most girls don't wrestle, or girls shouldn't wrestle, or whatever. And I feel like that's a huge issue in this country. I mean, I feel like it's basically a metaphor for a lot of things.
Yeah.
So. I feel like I have a lot to say on the topic, and I love talking about it.
No, absolutely. People would say, women shouldn't wrestle because some, idiots have the mentality women should be at home raising the family or in the kitchen. But it's not the 1920s. It's not the 1930s or 40s or 50s. People need to grow up with the times. And so there's a lot of stereotyping too. But the point of the show, by the way, for me, it's saying, oh, hey, you read and learn at a 5th grade level, but you shouldn't be able to do this. You say you're retarded, but we never met a person who says they're retarded have an actual talk show. And you've seen that for over the 6.5 years. It's a process. And I bet you've been discriminated too, and you had to overcome those labels. And you say, don't judge me by looking at me. Judge me by what I do.
Yeah, I believe in that. That's true, yeah. I would definitely recommend your show to other athletes and talents out there. I think that it's a great opportunity to, get your voice out there if you have anything that you need to say. It's a great opportunity to promote yourself, and it's a great opportunity to make a new friend.
No, absolutely. Now, I do have a couple questions for you off the air, but before we go, I do want to plug real fast. But we will be doing a Instagram Live for 20 minutes, so make sure to go follow us. And your description will be in the bottom of the screen so people can follow you on Instagram as well. Wrapping up our interview segment, it was a real honor and privilege to have you as a guest, and I'm looking forward to part 2 down the road.
Yeah, thank you.